Hey guys, and welcome to the first installment of my James Cameron reviews. I'm going to be reviewing all James Cameron films, all the movies in his filmography, up to the release of the new Avatar movie, so hopefully one or two a week. We're going to start with The Terminator, and I invited my dad on here to talk about it with me. How's it going?
It's going great. It's going great. We just watched it.
You just watched it. Yes. And I thought you'd be the perfect person to have on to talk about it because I know how massive of a fan you are of this movie.
I was such a fan. It came out when I was about 15 years old. It was 84, I think. I could not believe the impact that this movie had on everything because it had to do with time travel. The intensity of the movie was unique. It was unique. It was so ahead of its time. And for me, I ended up watching it like 20 times in like just a couple of years. We got on a VHS tape after I had seen it initially, and I just kept watching it and thinking, this is such a great movie.
Yeah, and I think it's a cool perspective difference too, because for you, obviously, you saw it when it first came out. You're a lifelong, diehard fan of this movie. And for me, I love this movie. It's one of my favorite movies, but I saw it for the first time when I was in middle school, so a long time after it came out. And since I've seen it a few times, but not even close to how many times you've seen it. So I think it's kind of a nice perspective difference.
Yeah, and I think that the fact that, like, when I watched it, there was no internet, and there wasn't as great a chance of a spoiler. So the way this movie opens and the way these two guys, they come from wherever, and all of a sudden they're hunting Sarah Connor, it wasn't clear, like, what was going on. Like, she was in jeopardy. Sarah Connors are being killed, and it was a lot of it was still a really big surprise, and it was unfolding, and that intensity of the unfolding back before Terminator was a franchise was so intense, and that's what really gripped me the most and made me such a fan of this movie from the very first time I watched it.
Yeah, even for me, knowing a lot about it, because even before I had actually seen the film, like you said, the internet's out there, so I knew that Arnold's the bad guy. I knew that he's the Terminator. I knew that in that club scene when both Michael Biehn and Arnold's characters are in that club, I knew Arnold was the bad guy, right? And I can imagine, like, it would be way cooler to see it without knowing that. But at the same time, for me, this film does such an amazing job, and it's a testament to James Cameron's ability to write and direct. It's just completely amazing how he basically tells you nothing, right? You have no idea why, there's this dude, super muscular dude who's naked and just got zapped onto this world, and then he's hunting all these Sarah Connors one by one. And then you don't know why this other guy showed up all of a sudden, again, totally naked, and seems to know which Sarah Connor to go after, right? So you're not sure that difference, and then you're not really sure what both of their motivations are. You don't know anything. You don't understand what's even going on. I thought it was pretty amazing that you could go that long without knowing, but also be super intrigued and actually care about a character. You care about Linda Hamilton's character. You care about Sarah Connor right from the get-go. And how do you pull that off?
Well, she was so relatable. I mean, she's having first of all, the whole movie is really just a really bad 2 days for Sarah Connor. I mean, it starts out and, like, she's at work, and a kid puts sherbet in her pocket. She's a waitress. She spills water on a guy's leather jacket, and so all of a sudden her day is just not real good. And then it keeps going from there. She finds out these Sarah Connors are being killed. She ends up having a bad guy blows her off, and so she loses her date. She goes out by herself. So and I hate to say it, but we've all had days and times like this where it's like everything's against you, and like, geez, I can't win, right? How could this get any worse? Right. But in this case, it gets unbelievably worse. For I think that she really delivers. Linda Hamilton really delivers that. To see her go through what she went through, and then all of a sudden now she's in this bar, and it's really amped up. Now she realizes she's in jeopardy, and now she's on the phone she can't get a hold of the police. And, it's like, call back later. It's like, geez, this is bad. She can't get a hold of her girlfriend who's getting waxed at the house. They let you see at least one of the other Sarah Connors be terminated, horrifically. And his intensity and impact in that sequence where he's like, Sodakana, and she's like, yes, who are you? And he's like, and he just smashes that door open, breaks that breach, goes in there and just puts like 4 or 5 rounds, 45 rounds into her, and it's just so powerful, so quick, emotionless, and then all of a sudden now she realizes she's in jeopardy, and she's looking for help, and there's no help coming right away.
Yeah, and again, it's another testament to James Cameron's ability to create great female characters. A lot of times now, there's a ton of female characters out there, a lot of female protagonists, but they can't seem to do it the way that James Cameron does it. He has this way of like creating such great female characters that feel like real people. They are super strong and they overcome huge obstacles and they grow in strength as they overcome each obstacle, but they also are extremely vulnerable and are very human. And it makes them feel very real and authentic. And like you said, Linda Hamilton pulls it off so well, and it's so well acted. She's able to make you feel for her, feel this empathy for her right off the bat. Before, like you said, before the Terminator even really is a concern for her, she's having a horrible day. Like you said, the ice cream, she gets stood up. So yeah, you already feel for her. And then I just think it's a mix of her incredible performance and then James Cameron's ability to create such great female characters versus what's out there now. A lot of times they make the mistake, they're super strong, but they have no vulnerabilities. They don't feel very human, right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I really do agree. And he did the same thing with Aliens, where Sigourney Weaver, she was the female protagonist. Right. And I was young watching these movies, and I remember thinking to myself, like, these women are lovely. They're women who are thrust into a role they never trained for. They weren't like, all my life I'm going to be a Marine, and I'm going to go and I'm going to kick some butt. So many of these women protagonists since then, they lose that femininity whenever they become so strong, and that's the part that he really does well, and it makes it for such a better, well-developed character. And I that's what I love about what he did with Linda Hamilton and Sarah Connor. I absolutely loved her character, and I loved how she started through early on. She was like, "What's going on? Can I even believe Kyle Reese? Who is this guy? What's going on?" And oh my God, And then she went from needing to be saved to doing the saving in the very end. And at the end, she's like, "On your feet, soldier," to Reese, who's dying. He's already been shot. He's dying, and she was able not only to get beyond that, she was able to end up destroying the Terminator. It took such great strength, and that evolution was phenomenal.
Right, but even her final line, telling him that he's terminated,
and that
delivery, it just shows that growth that happened, and I know, and this is kind of switching gears a little bit, but it relates the fact that not only was she able to grow it in that way, but then it's a testament also to the casting and just how well written the story is. But with so little time, you have Sarah Connor and Kyle Reese able to form a relationship during this whole evolution of hers and his and everything going on. And there's so much emotion behind it. You feel it, and it feels very real. It feels like two real people that have been through a lot. There's so many layers to how they feel about each other. And they're able to portray that in such a small amount of time. And it's not only like a small amount of time for the characters, right? They get like one night in a seedy motel. But it's also a small amount of time for the viewer. You get a really just quick glimpse, and somehow, I don't know about you, but I felt it. It's very real, and it had so much emotion behind it.
It did, and I love the fact, and this is on the testament of Linda Hamilton and on Michael Biehn. I love how their characters transform, and he becomes more emotional and softer as she's starting to harden up. They have their moment at the motel where he's honest with her that he loved her all this time, and they come together, okay. And after that, she really bought into what her role is. It was to make sure she could conceive John, and she has to save the world. And I think for her, it's registering. But I think that the performance that they both provide is so powerful. Back in the 80s, when I watched it was really strong. And there wasn't a lot of like time travel stories. And this loop is crazy. It's like
Yeah.
like he is the father of John, who they go back, and he's going back in time to conceive him after he already knows John. Like,
Yeah.
it's like it's one of those, time travel is either linear or there's relational, different paths that exist all at the same time or whatever it might be. There wasn't a lot of storylines out there for time travel.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, now there's so many. I mean, it's such a big thing to make a time travel story, and some of them are like the best stories. Like we watched Steins Gate, the anime, which is amazing. Yeah. Lost had stuff about time travel, and there's tons, just probably hundreds of movies and shows now that have all kinds of paradoxes and stuff like that, right? But I can see that. I mean, this does such a good job, even by today's standards, with all that other content out there. This still holds up. I mean, it kind of messes with your head when you realize like everything going on, and the way that the film was able to portray the story without telling you anything. Like I know we already said how it does a great job of not doing too much exposition at the beginning, and it really just shows you a ton of stuff, and without any context, and somehow it's so super intriguing. Well, not only that, but the fact that they were able to convey a time travel story with minimal exposition. When the exposition does happen, and we both talked about this earlier, the way that they're both in that parking garage, and the cops are kind of looping around, and Arnold's looping around, right? And there's all these threats. So they're talking, and it's your first piece of information that we as an audience need to understand the story. So it had to happen at some point. But I just think it's like the most clever way to handle exposition. You have a looming threat in the back of your mind. So there's a little bit of suspense there as they're explaining things. So it doesn't lose your interest or whatever in typical exposition scenes. I just thought that was really clever.
Yeah, and that's a great way to put it. And I don't even think about that at the time. And, it's just that you learn a complex storyline without even feel like you're being told what it is. And I think that was pretty remarkable. And they spent a little more time doing that also whenever Reese is being interviewed by that goofball doctor. He's a criminal psychologist. And so he's yawning. He doesn't even want to be there. I mean, first of all, you got this serial killer on the loose. You actually have another Sarah Connor who's being attacked. And you're yawning and you don't even want to be there. This is what drives people in this industry. And so they really make him out to be an idiot. And then whenever he's being so flighty with his story, you're not taking him seriously. And then Reese like, I've had enough. I've told you everything. Well, there was some time spent there where you could learn a little bit more about the storyline if you're paying attention.
Yeah, little tidbits about the future and everything.
But you may think of something that's really important. Did you notice whenever like the Terminator is closing in or is around, that dun 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 dun, like we're in the like the soundtrack was really well done. They spent a lot of time on certain things that your mind attaches to, saying, "Oh, this is not good. Oh, that's that sound. This is," right. And it really hammers away just the constant threat that this machine, whose only purpose in its programming is to destroy Sarah Connor, no matter what. In a time that there's no weaponry that's even able to kill it.
Yeah, it feels unstoppable and nonstop.
It feels unstoppable, and the music is so good. Then I think his name is Fidel. During one part where Sarah Connor's girlfriend gets killed and her boyfriend gets killed in the apartment, her music in her little headphones is "It's a Mistake," and they keep repeating, "It's a mistake. It's a mistake."
I didn't even notice that.
Da, 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 da. Yeah, and there's other ones too. One where it's something about burning, and he obviously burns in the end. After the tractor trailer. Is exploded by Reese. There's a lot of really clever, tie-ins, and then the tie-ins also. There's some foreshadowing. There's one part where whenever the Terminator he drives this like that station wagon he stole, and he drives to Sarah Connor's house to kill the first Sarah Connor. They show his wheel stop on these toys in the ground, and it stopped and crushed this truck. And later in the movie, he gets crushed by a truck. So. After watching it 20 times, you pick up on a few things. Yeah. There's a lot of those little foreshadowings. It kind of makes it fun to rewatch because you're like, that's kind of clever. That's kind of clever. A lot of little clever things. And for being his first movie, and doing all those things.
Yeah, that's amazing. Who comes out of the gate and like you said, his first movie. I know that Piranha 2 was technically the first film he was credited as being a director for, but I don't know how involved he was with that. So we're just considering this his first feature film. But yeah, I can't imagine having the talent, the raw talent, to just come out of the gate, not write this story, portray it so perfectly. The cast it so perfectly, just everything so perfect, and yeah, it'd be your first time. Even the symbolism, for a first time director and writer. To me, this film symbolizes so much because on one hand, you have Arnold, who's doing a great job of portraying that soulless, emotionless, robotic version of life over here. And then on the other end, you have the other extreme with two characters that are going through the most emotional part of their entire lives, and you can really feel it. And there's so much emotion behind it, and it's so human. There's so much hate and fear and just every emotion and anger just wrapped up into their end, and you get both constantly. And it's just such a great storyline, and you see that sort of pattern like with a lot of stories, like Star Wars or Lord of the Rings, and some of the greatest stories ever have found a way to do that. I don't know. I just find it amazing that somehow Terminator was able to find a way to wrap a pretty simple, just suspenseful film with a killer basically into a pretty big concept, a really successful concept that works for the film really well, with obviously a much more complex storyline.
You almost could see this happening. Like it was 40 years. He says he came back from 40 years later, which is now, by the way.
Yeah, so, I know.
In like 2 years' time, it's 40 years, so it's here. So
yeah.
But you know what? Also, I think one thing about James Cameron too is his typecasting. Like, so Linda Hamilton is in the second Terminator. You got Michael Biehn. He's typecast with Sigourney Weaver in Aliens. He's Corporal Hicks, does a great job there too. You got Bill Paxton, who was just the punk, who's like "F you, a-hole," and he didn't lose. He's not the guy who got his heart torn out, is he? The other guy got his heart torn out. Yeah. So, but he ends up being in Titanic. He does such a nice job of like picking out his actors and actresses and getting them in the right roles. And then Arnold as Terminator was such a phenomenal decision. It's perfect. I mean, he's massive. He's huge, And we've talked about this earlier too. There were other large actors out there. I mean, you had Lou Ferrigno. Right. You had other guys. You had a couple guys out of the Conan.
They're all his
buddies.
All
his buddies.
Yeah.
And but Arnold just did such a phenomenal job of delivering and making a cyborg seem very real.
Yeah.
A very real future.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone else. Although there are guys who are big like that, I don't know if anyone else could have pulled that off because he had the size. The accent, for some reason, adds to the whole thing. It does. And he just has that perfect look of being like a robot. He sells it. But then he's just human enough to kind of get that focused, fierce look in his face that really is intimidating. And I don't know, he just pulls it off so perfectly. A funny thing, too, I remember seeing an interview with Arnold, and he was saying that when he was saying the line for the first time, "I'll be back," and he saw that on the script, he said, "I think it should be, I will be back." And he fought with James Cameron about this, I guess. And James Cameron was intent on him saying, "I'll be back." He thought it would sound a lot cooler and better. And I guess Arnold didn't really understand that. He liked kind of the way like James Cameron kind of liked the way that he said, I'll be back. So it's like, it's funny because then when he went to say it, obviously that's the most iconic line ever now. But the fact that Arnold didn't even get it at first, that just kills me. And the fact that James Cameron had that vision, like, no, you have to say this line, Right. It's so perfect.
Right. Yeah, it's just not your average line. I mean, it is literally like the franchise line,
Yeah, literally. And it really feels like, looking at it now, that not only did he have that vision with like lines or casting, he also, I mean, I know you agree with this because you saw it when it came out, but even from my perspective, seeing it now again, he had to have been ahead of his time with just the pace of the movie. Yeah. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. You absolutely hit it on the head. This movie doesn't let you rest. There's a moment where you rest whenever they're in the motel, but you almost like a needed rest. Where it's a temporary break, but you know and that's something else too. You know it's temporary because he's closing in on you. He's honing in, especially whenever Sarah Connor's on the phone with her mom, being like, "Mom, I'm at the Tiki Motel," and you're like, "No, don't tell," and it pans over at the mom's place, the cabin, and it's just wrecked, and all of a sudden you look and you see him talking and using her voice. That's an intense scene.
Yeah,
and you're like, oh, now it's a matter of hours before he's there.
Right.
So the pacing is it's intense. Even not only the pacing of the whole movie to the very end, which by the end I remember the first time I watched it, I was exhausted. I was like, geez, like, man, like I didn't think anything was going to stop this creature.
Right.
But even like the scenes, like the intensity of the killings was so swift, fast, and violent. And back in '84, it really, really hammered home. It did such a fine job, especially in that bar scene. In the first part of the movie, whenever you're not sure who's who, and you have Reese he's trying to clear people out of the way, and Arnold is like looking at her, walking right towards her, and he's like charging his weapon, ready to shoot her in the head. The laser sighting goes right in her head, and it's not like a laser sight because it doesn't. Her perception wouldn't be this big red dot. I mean, obviously it'd be one dot in one eye if that's what really happened. But the imagery was so excellent, and it was like one trigger pull away from ending mankind. Because that's all it was. All you do is put one round in her head, and it's over. And it was like that split second where Kyle gets the last person out of his way and gets a 12 gauge round off, and all that did is push him back. It didn't hurt him. It was awesome to see that happen. Yeah. And then he's able to get to knock him on the ground enough time for her to start running away. And then after Arnold spraying the place with his Uzi, he turns and he walks up on Sarah, who's on the ground again, and he reloads, he charges, he lowers the weapon to shoot her, and you're like, this is over. It's like choom, choom. It goes. I mean, that's how fast it was. And next thing you know, Kyle's like, and he gets a couple more rounds off just to buy enough time. Yeah. And it was like, it was those kind of action sequences and the pacing was just as revolutionary in '84 as like the Matrix style of fighting back in the 2000s when that came out. And it kind of changed things, and other movies used some of that slow motion, rounds just missing you and you're bending back and that kind of stuff from the Matrix. So that's another thing too about the revolutionary nature of the Terminator.
Yeah, I can see it, and at times, like, I think seeing it today, like, if I saw it for the first time, right, and I didn't know that this came out a long time ago, I wasn't aware that this is a revolutionary movie. If I didn't know any of those things, I could see someone saying, you know, that, like, that bar scene or a lot of scenes in it are very typical. It's like a classic trope in these type of movies. But knowing what I know about it, it's amazing because then you realize, no, this movie probably developed those tropes because it works so well and it still works today. And it works great in this film, but I mean, I can see it setting that standard for a lot of films like it. It's pretty amazing, I think, from a filmmaking standpoint.
Yeah, and I do feel fortunate because of not having all this stuff in the back of my mind. Back in the day, you're in '84. You only seen prior to '84, and your experiences in life are only those things. You know, so there's only so much theater, there's only so much in movies, and all of a sudden, Terminator comes out, low budget.
Yeah,
how about that?
Right.
That I can't believe what he was able to do with that kind of budget. It was like $5 million, something real small.
Yeah, it made a ton of money after that, but
yeah,
I'm just amazed too because knowing how low budget it is,
yeah,
and the effects and everything, like especially in like the scenes where they show the future. I mean, yes, you can tell it's low budget. You can tell that it's pretty basic in terms of what it's showing you. It's just, a ton of fog. Real dark, just costumes to make it seem like they're somewhat futuristic and skulls everywhere and stuff. But there's something about it that feels very gritty and real and visceral to me that seems like probably what it would have been like if like there was a nuclear war or robots took over, right? I mean, that's probably what it would be like. And I just love the way they did that, even with, like you said, such a low budget. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if Rome takes over Greece, Greece eventually looks like Rome. You get aqueducts and you get Rome structures and you get the infrastructure, and it's beautiful, but it's Rome beautiful because it's still human, it's mankind. I mean, you go to the future and first of all, the transitions to go to the future are really great, but you get to the future and it is this desolate despair, skulls everywhere because of the end of mankind. It's literally it looks like it's the brink of the end of mankind when you go to those future shots, and that's such a truth to it. Machines don't care that there's flowers or awkward. They don't care about structures. They're just machines, right? So that's what it looked like. It really truly felt like machines just took over. It's a great vision to do that. But I actually love the transitions. Like there was one scene where Kyle Reese he hot wires this car and he's next to a construction site. And he's like just sitting there looking at construction equipment, and all of a sudden he has like this PTSD of machines because machines in his time are killing people. And so it transitions. He's staring at like the track of one of the construction vehicles, and as the track moves, the film pans down, and all of a sudden it goes from dirt to like skulls and stuff. Now you're in the future, and there was a number of really wonderful transitions, and those were fun too.
Yeah, they were clever, right? They were so well. The whole film's so well directed, like super low budget, but it doesn't really seem like it. Like that's such a clever transition to get to the future like that. I'm amazed.
Great creativity is free, right?
Right. So. That's right. In terms of the pacing, though, like you mentioned, I will say the one negative that I thought I had with the movie was that when they get to the motel around that time, I forget if that's like the third act or end of the second act, it feels like it slows down a little bit. It's your first reprieve. It felt like that was maybe my only negative, is that the pacing slowed down at that point. But having talked to you about it and then watching it again, I take it back, I think, because it seems like that's your only time to see these characters sort of like in almost a normal scenario, just in a motel together. It's still not normal because you know the Terminator is going to show up at some point, but it was somewhat normal. And you know, these Studio Ghibli movies that I love, Miyazaki, who makes them, talked about many times that one of the things he thinks that makes his movies a little bit better is the fact that he always gives his characters a chance to have experiences without any stimuli or anything happening for them to react to. So they're just in normal scenarios, and the fact he says that he gives them some time like that is why his worlds feel real and lived in, and his characters feel a little bit more real. So taking all those things into consideration, I would say that I actually have no negatives with this movie because that was my only one, and as time has gone on, I totally think that's actually a good thing that the film does. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do, and I don't think. See, you think in a different way. You approach films a different way than I do. For me, it was a little bit of a breather. What it also did, what it allowed the actor and actress like Linda Hamilton and Michael Biehn to now perform enough to let us believe that there was more to their relationship than just like one being saved and a savior, and and they're struggling, and because there's one thing to have a great appreciation for somebody who's saving your life, or appreciation for you're trying to save somebody's life. But then it evolves into find out there's a little bit more to this. There's a little bit more backstory to him being there for sure about he already knew her, and then they had a chance to develop their. I mean, they only had like 24 hours together, and so they had to sell the idea that they could literally be in love by the end of that 24 hours. And I think they do a wonderful job. And it's actually, it's sad at the end whenever Kyle dies and she rolls him over. She didn't have a chance even to be sad. She looks at him, he's dead, and all of a sudden the Terminator goes zoop. You're like, oh no, are you kidding me? His top torso is coming after her now. So I think they did a phenomenal job of selling that, and I love that. That's one of my favorite parts of the movie is that relationship and that bond. That really just cemented this movie for me.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's super powerful, and I know we already said how the characters and the audience didn't have a lot of time for the development of that relationship, but between the story and the way it was acted, I mean, it works. It feels so powerful. And I love the fact, too, that there's not a ton of dialogue exchange between them. there's a few exposition scenes, and then at the motel, there's actually, I don't think there's that many words spoken. And when there are words spoken, it's very powerful. Like when she comes up to him and says, "It's never going to be the same again, is it?" Or something like that.
Right.
Like it's always going to be like this. And it kind of hit me at that point, like, wow. I mean, I have a little bit of empathy for her. Like I can see, that she's getting a glimpse into his reality and realizing that she's headed for it, and that her life's never going to be the same again. This is it. There's just something about that. Like, it's one line. They didn't keep talking about it. He didn't turn around and they had this whole big discussion. It was just one line, and something about that was so impactful for me. It cemented my, empathy for her character. I don't know if you felt like that, but I love the dialogue, and it was so strategic. It was so good.
I agree with you completely. I love that. And then whenever he said to her, he said to her, but he came back for her, and then he went over and he started loading up the explosives. He kind of, I guess he regretted saying it or whatever. And then she came over, and it's like you could see all these emotions. It's like it was all over the place, but yet still, it worked really well. You have she's come to this realization, this is going to be the rest of her life, for however long that life is, and then the Kyle Reese loved her for all this time, came back just for her, and I don't know. It's just well done. And she does a really good job also in the end, whenever she's in the Jeep and the child speaks Spanish to her and she doesn't understand Spanish. She's like, "What did he just say?" And the guy said, "There's a storm coming." And she's like, "I know." And the storm she's referring to is the nuclear war and everything else is coming down the pike. And then she drives away in the Jeep and that music. Dun, 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 dun,
Yeah.
Dun. When I was younger, I was in a band with my really great friends Pete and Spiro, and we would jam and we'd keep an open mic, and and we had this old Fostex recording, 4-channel recording. We would record on cassette tapes and make it a 4-channel recording. It's actually pretty cool. And so we were just jamming. We used to play metal and other kind of music, and Spiro was just like starting. He was on a synthesizer, and he's like, dun, dun, dun. So I was on the bass and the drum machine, and so we just did one take, and we did that song at the end, just whatever we could remember, and it was one take. It actually sounded pretty good. We recorded it. This one recorded it. I love the music. I think it ended really well. It was perfect for a sequel, and I'm a big fan of the sequel. I love the original, but I'm also a big fan of the sequel.
I know for me, the second one in my memory stands out, much more. And I think one of the reasons is because I saw both when I was a lot younger, and this is more of a suspense film, whereas the second one is like a straight action film, one of the best ever made, in my opinion. I think watching it back now, it's interesting because I think I might like the first a little bit more. And it doesn't get that credit. I know you agree with me, but it really doesn't get that credit. People always talk about the second one, but I think the first one is worth revisiting for a lot of people because it really is a different movie. It's not competing with the second one. It's totally different, and it does what it's trying to do really, really well. It's a great movie. I had a great time watching it. I have no negatives. If you haven't seen it, I don't know what you're doing, but you should go out and see it, even though we just spoiled the entire thing. It's still worth it, though. And thank you to my dad for coming on. It was great beginning to talk about this movie. I know it's one of your favorites.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Harry. This was a blast. I really appreciate your perspectives when it comes to these movies too. I find that you come from a different angle, and it's really intriguing to hear. I'm just a fan.
Yeah, well, we both have our perspectives. You saw it when it first came out, and I more recently am appreciating it. So it's really cool. I thought it would be cool to have my dad on. This is awesome. This is my first film review in my series of James Cameron reviews coming out every week leading up to the release of the new Avatar movie. It was awesome getting to start with Terminator. I'm looking forward to maybe having you back for another film.
I'd love to.
That would be great. But thank you guys for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment. Let us know your thoughts on Terminator. Did you see it when it first came out? Any opinions on the first movie? It would be awesome to be able to talk to you guys in the comments. Thanks for watching. Talk to you later. See ya.